As we have seen, U.S. President-elect Donald J. Trump is making veiled threats about annexing what he now calls the great state of Canada, from Governor Justin Trudeau.
We're subsidizing Canada. If we're going to subsidize it, let it become a state.
As a result, Canadian politicians of all stripes are now worrying about how best to appease the soon-to-be inaugurated Trump.
We can see right now that President Trump doesn't respect Mr. Trudeau, and it worries me.
I don't think Mr. Trudeau's handling the domestic political situation well. I have less confidence he'll be able to do it internationally.
A lack of defense spending by some NATO member states has long been a pet peeve of President Trump.
Some are way below 1%, and that's unacceptable.
And Canada is clearly in his sights. It is time to target how exactly Canada accounts for the money spent on national defense. While all 32 NATO members have agreed to a spending target of 2% of their gross domestic product, or GDP, on defense, Canada currently only spends 1.37% of GDP on the Department of National Defense. With the release of their most recent Defense Policy Update, DPU, the Trudeau Liberals predict they will not reach that magic 2% of GDP goal until around 2032.
You've ruined this country!
However, at this juncture, in 2024, it looks highly unlikely that either Trudeau or the Liberal Party will still be handling Canadian budgets 8 years from now. I have long argued that Canada does itself a disservice in the manner in which it calculates expenditures on our nation's defense. For instance, unlike the US and numerous other NATO maritime nations, Canada does not include the cost of our Coast Guard as defense spending. The question begs, why the hell not? The Royal Canadian Mounted Police could easily be categorized as a national security force and, like the Gendarmerie in France or the Carabinieri in Italy, add their budget to that of Canada's defense spending. All costs associated to the long-term care and treatment of Canadian veterans through Veterans Affairs Canada, the VAC, should be added to Canada's defense budget, as well as those are expenses for the cost of serving in the Canadian military. Throw in all the costs to maintain and operate military museums across Canada, as these educational facilities also serve to honor our military heritage and to enlighten Canadians to the self-sacrifice of our veterans. Shift those expenses across the ledgers, and I trust that we would already be exceeding the NATO 2% target. However, I recently read about a brilliant proposal by Canada's northern premiers to label federal investment in Arctic infrastructure as defense spending.
Canada's Arctic is a key part of our national identity as Canadians.
In early December, Canada released its new Arctic foreign policy, which promises increased investment in a range of sectors, including critical mineral development, as well as transportation and energy. However, the policy offered no specific spending promises. In their defense policy update, the Liberals allocated $218 million over the next 2 decades to build and operate what they call support hubs in the Arctic. The only designated hub announced so far is an expanded airport at Inuvik, Northwest Territories. This is part of Canada's announced NORAD modernization. The truth is that Canada could and should commit to constructing transportation hubs, airports, and seasonal seaports, and labeling all of it as an investment in Canada's defense. Of course, all these facilities would be dual purpose, with benefits to the civilian communities. However, if you cannot transit the Arctic, you cannot defend it. Hence, it is, in my opinion, de facto defense spending.
We can look at the 2% NATO target as well. And projects like this add to national security, they add to national defense.
In making the pitch to invest defense budget dollars to develop the Arctic, Northwest Territories Premier R.J. Simpson proposed the constructions of roads to allow for the mining of critical minerals. Apparently, Canada's Northwest Territories is home to the largest proven deposits of tungsten outside of China. While I am not well versed in all things mining, I am familiar with tungsten as a military commodity. The sheer density of this metal makes it a highly sought-after component for armor-piercing shells, as well as armored plating for military vehicles. Canada making it possible for mining companies to access our own tungsten deposits would definitely be a solid investment in defense. Now, before the Colonel Blimp Brigade begin their harumphing and tub-thumping, denouncing the notion that national infrastructure projects are not defense expenses, I wish to remind them that there is an historical precedent to support my theory. Following the December 7, 1941 Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers immediately began the construction of the 2,700-kilometer-long Alaska Highway. It was seen as a strategic necessity to link remote Alaska with the rest of the USA. This incredible feat was completed in less than 10 months at a cost of $185 million. It was the most expensive project undertaken by the US Army during the Second World War. I'm sure whoever is running Canada in the months to come will be able to convince Donald Trump that such an investment in Arctic infrastructure counts towards our defense budget. Hell, this could put Canada at 3% of our GDP on defense. This has been On Target, and I'm Scott Taylor.